Yeah, let's go ahead and look at the next strategy, which is from Christian. So I think Christian has really modified the strategy and incorporated open interest into his strategy. So let's take a look.
Hi guys, I'm Christian, and this is my submission for the Botcamp Cohort 12. So my strategy is called Following Spot Orderbook, Skew, and Fading Open Interest RSI. And it's around the idea that spot traders have the heavier hand in the crypto market, and aggressive perpetual traders often call tops, bottoms, or at least some mean reversion. The data I want to look at is, for one, the spot orderbook delta. So the resting liquidity delta, meaning the difference between the bid and the ask side, for a depth of 1 to 5% around the mid price. And for the activity of the perpetual traders, we can look at the open interest, usually only for the USD margin contracts because it's a bit cleaner. And instead of looking at it in absolute terms, we can measure relative changes with RSI values. So on the right side, you can see a screenshot of the platform I use, Trader.io. Here you can see the RSI value for the spot order book delta. On the lower side is the RSI value for the open interest. And you can often see that when these both RSIs are at opposing extreme levels, so the order book is heavily skewed to the bid side and the open interest is relatively low, that price tends to go up. Or on the opposite, when the spot order book is skewed to the ask side, to the sell side, and we have a relatively high open interest, that price tends to go down. So the strategy is really to identify these extreme levels when they are at the opposing side and then take a position in the market. The order I built for this strategy is very simple. I fetch data from the market data provider about the order book, and I fetch data about the open interest from the Binance REST API. I then calculate the RSI values for both of them. I check if I have any active positions. If not, and the RSI values are at opposing extremes defined by a certain threshold, then I basically start into a position with a specific interval that I can define beforehand. And if I have the active position now, I check basically if the RSI values are neutralized. So that means if they reverted back to the 50 level. If not, I monitor for a stop loss. So just a maximum loss I want to take. If that hits, I close the position. And if these RSI values are neutralized back to the 50 level, I take profit. So let's run the strategy. I have here a configuration file for the controller I built for my strategy. And these are the parameters you have to define. So you have to give it a total amount of position size you want to have. You have to give it the connectors for spot data, for the perpetuals data, and which exchange you want to trade on. Of course, you have to give it the trading pair and a interval, which is important for the RSI calculation. Then the amount quote is the single order size, basically, that you give it when you have the TWAP running. Then you give it a TWAP interval, so the interval you want to execute orders at. You give it a stop loss and a cooldown time. The cooldown time is relevant when a stop loss or take profit was hit, to give the controller time to reset, basically. Then you give it the percentage of the order book, where you want to calculate the delta between the bids and the asks. So here it's 1%. And then you give it the RSI length for both the spot and the open interest, and the upper and lower bound or threshold values, basically. So the oversold and overbought levels, where you identify the extremes. Okay, so let's run the strategy. So it's starting now. And when you type status live, I created this overview for my controller inspired by the PMM controller, I think. So it shows you data about the spot order book status. So for a book depth of 1%, you see the bid volume, the ask volume, and the delta, and the calculated RSI. And of course, this will take a bit of time to actually be calculated because it's live data and it needs a specific amount of data first. Here you can also see the open interest and the RSI for that one. And on the lower side here, I just created a visualization for the RSI metrics, basically on the top one for the order book delta and on the lower side for the open interest. These dots that you see are the RSI values, and here are the bounds or the thresholds to identify the extremes. And what you're looking for now is basically to take a position when they are basically at the opposing extremes. So after running it for around 20 minutes, now you can see that the RSI values are actually calculated. And here you can now see the open interest actually being at an extreme level to the downside. So there's relatively low open interest, but the order book delta is pretty much in the middle around the 50 level. So no position is taken. And since I'm running this on a Sunday with relatively low trading activity on the coin, at least, actually no position has been taken during the whole day. Of course, there's plenty of more work to do with the controller. First of all, it needs some forward and backwards testing. And for backwards testing, I actually have to record data about the order book and the open interest with QuantLab. Secondly, instead of using a single take profit, I actually want to use a trailing stop in order to ride the price further if it's actually moving favorably in my direction in order to increase profits. And third, I want to actually aggregate data for the spot order book and the open interest from different exchanges. At the moment, I use Binance with a majority of the trading activity, which is fine. But to get a bit more data, you can aggregate other exchanges like Coinbase for the spot order book, or other exchanges like Bybit for the open interest.
Christian, that was amazing. I really enjoyed how clear your presentation was.